Hello, I'm John Valleca with Gun Owners of America, and I want to thank you for watching this special GOA video. We're going to talk today about an issue that's important not only to you and me, but to our children and grandchildren. We're talking about the November election, less than 3 months away, in what could be called Fire Armageddon, in reference to that epic end times battle, because make no mistake about it, the Second Amendment is on the ballot in a big way. And there are many candidates who would love to see its ultimate destruction. Now, I know you've heard the old cliche before that this election is the most important of our lifetime. But this year, the evidence is impossible to ignore. If Democrats win nationally, meaning they control the White House and both chambers of Congress, the table will be set for a wholesale assault on the Second Amendment. Now, before I go any further, let me stop and say that I know there are many pro-gun Democrats out there all over the country who cherish the Second Amendment. But the problem is that those folks are, by and large, not in elected office and no longer hold much sway over the national party agenda. Pro-gun conservative Democrats have been abandoned by their party and cut out of having a meaningful role. And that was intentional. Maybe that could be the subject of another video. But back to this election. Let's start all the way at the top of the ticket with Joe Biden. He may be tucked away in his basement bunker, but he's been cooking up some serious gun control for years. In fact, as chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee in 1994, it was Biden who pushed through the so-called assault weapons ban, otherwise known as the Clinton gun ban. But for Biden 2.0, the semi-auto ban is just the starting point. For one thing, he would make that gun ban permanent. Remember, the '94 ban had a 10-year expiration date attached to it. Believe me, if Biden, Schumer, and Pelosi are in charge, there won't be any sunset provision. Next, he would treat these ill-defined, commonly owned semi-automatic rifles, such as the AR-15, in a manner similar to how full autos are regulated today under the National Firearms Act. And what will this mean? Well, you would have to register your rifles with the federal government, pay $200 for a federal tax stamp for each gun, be subject to an intense background check, which includes your photo and fingerprints, along with some other red tape. In short, it's expensive, time-consuming, intrusive, not to mention blatantly unconstitutional. I'm sure there were people around in 1934 saying that this law will never be applied so broadly as to affect all guns, blah, blah, blah. But listen, laws are like ratchets, and gun laws in particular only get tighter and tighter over time. Now, if a person doesn't want to go through that laborious process of registering their AR-15 like a machine gun, the Biden plan includes, conveniently, a mandatory buyback period for these assault weapons. I love that language, buyback, as if the government paid for the gun in the first place. Now, if a person doesn't do one of those two things, registered or have it confiscated by the government, they become felons and risk having their doors kicked in and getting shot by the police. Well, is that being too hyperbolic? Look, at the end of the day, remember the quote attributed to George Washington. Government is not reason, it is not eloquence. Government is force. Like fire, it is a dangerous servant and a fearful master. I'll say it again. Government is force. It may not be their first resort, but it can certainly be their last. Up to now, we've been talking about just one of Biden's gun control objectives. He also has plans for national universal background checks, aka background registration checks, because that's the only way they would ever work. Gun bans for the elderly who, according to the Social Security Administration, cannot manage their own financial affairs. So goodbye to Grandpa's gun collection. A gun prohibition for misdemeanor convictions of amorphous hate crimes, and you can use your own imagination on how that might be implemented. In addition to a national red flag gun confiscation law, a 1 gun a month purchase limit to prevent stockpiling, and more. You can check it out on Joe Biden's own website, but you probably get the gist of it. Oh, and in case you're wondering if Sleepy Joe has the energy to pull off a scheme of this magnitude, he's promised to appoint the energetic 47-year-old Robert Beto O'Rourke as his Gunzar. And who could forget this quote?
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47. We're not going to allow it to be used against our fellow Americans anymore.
And of course, Kamala Harris stands ready to use the power of executive orders to destroy gun rights should the presidency slip into her hands. Much of Biden's agenda could be stopped by a Republican-controlled Senate. But the problem is, whichever party wins the White House most likely wins the Senate too. Here's why. Here's the current lay of the land in U.S. Senate races. Republicans hold a slight edge, 53 to 47, in addition to a tiebreaker vote in Vice President Pence. To become majority leader of the Senate, Chuck Schumer would need to win 4 seats or 3 if Biden were to win. By all accounts, there are at least 7 Senate seats in either the toss-up column or in the likely to switch parties category. Of the 7, only 1 is currently held by a Democrat, and that's in Alabama, where incumbent Senator Doug Jones will have a tough time defeating the popular former Auburn University football coach Tommy Tuberville. Go Tigers. The remaining 6, Arizona, Colorado, Iowa, Maine, Montana, and North Carolina, are all currently held by Republicans. So we can see that the map tilts in Schumer's favor. And 2 additional Democrat-helped seats could become competitive. That's Michigan and New Hampshire, but also Republican-held Georgia is looking more and more competitive. Now, this map can always change, but right now, this is most likely where control of the Senate will come down to. Looking at this map, you can also see the probability that a Biden victory at the top of the ticket will all but ensure that Democrats have enough momentum to carry the Senate. Because with the notable exception of Montana, the competitive Senate races are also competitive at the presidential level. So, worst case scenario, what would a Biden, Schumer, Pelosi triumvirate look like? Right out of the gate, there is no doubt that Chuck Schumer would tear up the Senate rulebook and get rid of the filibuster. This little piece of arcane parliamentary procedure is a powerful protection of the rights of the minority party in the Senate by requiring a supermajority to pass any controversial legislation. Now, not to get too schoolhouse rock here, but by way of contrast, the U.S. House is run by majority rule. By definition, the majority party can pretty much do whatever it wants as long as most of its members agree. For many years, pro-gun Democrats helped to keep the party in check when it came to gun rights, but as I mentioned earlier, those days are behind us. If Pelosi keeps the Speaker's gavel, the Pelosi anti-gun agenda, which is the same as the Biden agenda, which is the same as the Schumer agenda, would pass easily. In the Senate, by requiring a supermajority of 60 votes, the filibuster rule was designed to slow down the fast-moving legislation that can come from a simple majority in the House. Or, as George Washington is said to have told Thomas Jefferson in another probably apocryphal quote, "We pour our legislation into the senatorial saucer to cool it." Under Schumer, that saucer will be smashed, and the Senate will be run just like the House. Whatever Schumer wants, Schumer gets. Furthermore, and rather insidiously, a Democrat majority will be able to alter the playing field to make it difficult for any other party to ever win nationally again. One item on the agenda would be a so-called 52-state strategy that could permanently change the political map. Simply by granting Washington, D.C. statehood status, Democrats would be guaranteed 2 additional senators. Statehood for Puerto Rico could mean an additional 2 anti-gun senators, as well as perhaps 5 House seats. At that point, the road to victory for Republicans or any other party to win back, in particular the Senate, will be steep indeed. There are other items on their agenda, such as amnesty for illegal immigrants, that will result in millions of new voters who, according to a Pew poll, would vote for liberal anti-gun Democrats by an 8-to-1 margin. Blanket restoration for felons' right to vote, even though they won't get their Second Amendment rights restored. These things could further help consolidate power to the left. Last but not least, let's talk about the third co-equal branch of government, the judiciary. So far, more than 200 Trump-nominated judges have been confirmed to the lower courts and the high court. His greatest and most lasting legacy may well be his imprint on the judiciary. On the whole, Trump judges have been more pro-gun than those appointed by his Republican predecessors. But there is more work to do, particularly at the top. For the past decade, the Supreme Court has neglected the Second Amendment and therefore allowed the lower courts to twist the Heller and McDonald decisions into a gun control pretzel. Even though 5 of the 9 justices currently on the court were appointed by Republicans, the Second Amendment is slowly being eroded because the High Court refuses to hear any cases that would provide guidance to the lower courts on Heller, which recognized the Second Amendment as a right held by individuals and not a state National Guard, and McDonald, which incorporated that right to the states. Right now, GOA is reviewing firearms-related decisions by virtually every nominee likely to be selected by President Trump for the Supreme Court in a potential second term. We're doing this in order to sound the alarm against any anti-Second Amendment jurists who might slip through. However, if Biden wins, all bets are off. He will nominate activist justices who would leap at the chance to rewrite Heller and McDonald and rubber stamp whatever comes out of an anti-gun Congress. So there you have it. This is some, of course, by no means all, of what is at stake in the 2020 election. Is this the most important election in our lifetimes? Could this really be Armageddon for gun rights? That's for every gun owner to decide. That's for you to decide. But Second Amendment supporters must go into this election armed with the facts and the knowledge of what this country would look like under unified, anti-gun, totalitarian leftist rule. The thing to do right now is to register to vote and make sure the millions of new gun owners out there are also registered. The stakes are simply too high for even a single gun owner to sit this one out. GOA has been announcing endorsements up and down the ballot for solid pro-gun candidates who will stand for our right to keep and bear arms. Additionally, we'll soon be releasing our 2020 congressional rating. This is a tool that's extremely helpful for gun owners in seeing how your senators and representatives voted in Congress. So please consider signing up for a free action alerts that keep you up to date on these and many other issues with the link on the screen or in the description. I hope this video has served as maybe a wake-up call to some, a motivation for others, and I truly hope you'll join GOA's efforts in defeating the anti-gunners at the ballot box this election and preserving our Constitution and Bill of Rights, and especially our Second Amendment. Thank you for watching.